Let's continue our discussion of dictionaries, and we'll round it all off by talking about how dictionaries are iterable and what the methods and functions you can use for dictionaries. We've already seen that dictionaries are a data structure and they're unordered collections, so think of it as a map. And the fact that they store a key value pair and not just one value. Also, we've talked about how dictionaries are mutable. I can add new elements to dictionaries and make modifications to existing key value pairs. And using one of the methods, we'll also figure out how to remove items from dictionaries. So let's talk about the iterability of dictionaries. We know that a dictionary doesn't really have indexes. It actually has a key for which you can use to get the value. So I could only use the iterability part for loops in dictionaries, so I can't use indexing or slicing, anything like that. So the way I will write code is, let's say I define a dictionary, and let's fill it up with some elements, the letter H associated with the number 0, and the letter E associated with the number 1. So that's my dictionary, where the keys are the letter H and E, and their associated value are the numbers 0 and 1. And I'm able to do something like give me the value associated with the key H, and this should result in 0. So the way I use dictionaries in for loops is I will do for I in this dictionary D, and let's do print what I might be. So in this case, when you run this piece of code, Python will assume that you don't want the key value pair. Instead, you're only looking for a for loop for all the keys in dictionary D. So by default, if you do a for loop with just the name of the dictionary, it's going to assume that you want to run a for loop on all the keys. So printing I will print H, and then it'll skip the value and it'll print the next key E. And again, order doesn't really matter here, so you might be just doing this to see what different keys there are in your dictionary, but other than that, there aren't a lot of applications because it is in fact unordered. So what if you wanted to print the values in the dictionary, not just the keys? Because we know if I do for I and D, by default it's only going to give me a for loop over the keys. So that's when there are some methods that come in for dictionaries. The first one is dot keys itself. The second one is dot values. And the third one is dot items. And so each of these functions, think of them as your range functions. So they'll return a range to you that you can use in a for loop, but you cannot use them anywhere else. So I cannot do x equals d dot keys. It will store some value in here, but it's not gonna look into it's not going to be like a list of all the keys or a tuple of all the keys. That's not going to happen. So instead, you can only use these methods over here when you're running a for loop like this, when you're iterating over something. So I can do for I in d dot values. Once I write this piece of code, Python will first evaluate this whole thing, which it will say that is actually going to be, let's say, a list of 0 and 1, right? Because those are the values currently in my dictionary. And if I were to then say print I, it's going to print 0 and 1 for me. That's what the values method will do. And similarly, like here, instead of just D, I can do d.keys. And it's going to do the exact same thing, but instead of printing the values like 0 and 1, it's going to print out the keys H and E. So it's going to say, okay, I'm going to evaluate this whole thing to be all the keys you have. And it's going to run a loop for I cursor here, I becomes H, cursor there, I becomes E, and so on and so forth. The last one is the one that's more important, I think, the items method. In each of these cases, you had no idea what H was associated to or what this number 0 was associated to, because again, these are unordered, so you don't know where the pairs lie. That's where the items comes in. So I can do for I in d.items, print I. And what this guy will do is it will actually, so this whole thing will evaluate to your key value pair in a tuple. It will do H, 0, E, 1. Now this is pretty cool because instead of just getting one key at a time or one value at a time, you are now able to extract a pair at a time. So I will become this tuple. So when I print this code, when I run this code, it's going to print for the current value of I, it's going to print me a tuple, H, 0. And then the cursor moves on, and the next time it's going to print E, 1. Now this is very cool because now I can actually see the pairs other than, you know, compared to not being able to see the associated pairs here. So again, the most I've used these methods is to either find a particular key, so use a for loop with these methods to find a key in a dictionary. So say your dictionary is made of 5,000 key value pairs and you forget the name of all the values, the keys there are, and then you can do a for loop. And then you can say, oh, you know, if that current, so if I is equals to, let's say, key 95, I'm looking for key 95. If that is the case, then print its associated value. So let's try that. Let's write that code. Let's say for I in d.keys. So Python will go ahead and evaluate this to a list of all the keys there are in your dictionary, and then assign their value to I one by one with a cursor. And then you want to say, okay, if any of those keys is actually equals to, let's say, key 95, right? This is a string value. I'm hoping that there exists a key 95 in my dictionary. If any of these are the key I'm looking for, I want to get their associated value. So if any of these I values are this key, then I want to get D of I. So let's print that. Now again, what this means is, you might think this is, oh, you know, you're using indexing. No. D is a dictionary, right? So within the box brackets, I'm passing a key. And that key is key 95. So this will give me the value associated with the key 95, if I wanted it. But again, there are other methods, of course, to check if a key might be in there. You can just do something like D of key 95, right? But there is a chance that this might throw an error if this key value pair does not exist. So in this case, the for loop might be easier. So I use these methods with the for loop to find a key in a dictionary, or to find a key or value, right, in a dictionary, or to just print the pairs and see what's going on in there, just to look at the current status of the dictionary. That's where I'll use these methods, these three methods in particular. So here I've defined a dictionary with 3 keys and 3 associated values. So they're all strings. So key 1 paired with value 1, key 2 with value 2, key 3 value 3, and so on and so forth. And let's try all of their methods that we just looked at. So I will do for I in D, print I. So we know that this should by default print all the keys in the dictionary, and it does. And then we can also test out by adding the keys method to it. So Python again is going to evaluate what the keys are and then assign them one by one to I in a for loop and print those out. And then I can also do d.values. Now it should give me the associated values for all of these keys. And if I wanted everything together, sort of like a pair, then I'll use the items method, which does this. The key here, the value here. So I can then make it nicer. I can do print the key is, and I know I will become this tuple, right? And tuples are a collection, so I can use indexing. So I can do this and say, and value is this thing. So the 0th index is all keys. The 1st index is all values. If I were to print this out, it's going to say the key is key 1, the value is value 1, and so on and so forth. Now, a cool thing you can do with this for loop, because you know that I is going to be, or the d.items is going to return a tuple every single time. Let me go back here. The very basic example. Instead of just having for I and d.items, I can now do for I comma j in d.items. And let's do print I comma j here. Now, this is pretty cool. Because d.items is made of a tuple of 2 things, I gets assigned to the first thing, j gets assigned to the second thing across all different values. So I becomes key 1, then j becomes value 1. Next cursor, I becomes key 2, j becomes value 2. Next cursor, I becomes key 3, j becomes value 3. So there's not a lot of applications of using 2 dynamic variables in the for loop, but this is one of them. And it will help out if you want to separate out your keys and values, or you're trying to do a for loop where you need both keys and values happening at the same time. Let's also talk about a couple of other methods that I think are useful to know for dictionaries, and we'll start by the get method. So right now we know that if I need to get the value of a key, I will do key 1. Something like this, right? Pretty simple. But if this confuses you, where you think that, oh, I've only used it in terms of indexing or slicing with strings and lists and tuples and whatnots, and I only know how to pass numbers in here as indexes, well, you can then instead use the get method to get the value of a key. Something like this. Now again, let's pass in key 4, which we know does not exist. This does not throw an error compared to something like this. So the first one printed none because there currently exists no key value pair with the key 4. And then you're saying, okay, I'm going to use the traditional way of finding the value associated with key 4, and that will throw you an error. So if you're running a program where you don't want this kind of error happening, then I recommend going with the d.get route. So again, you're basically saying dictionary name dot get, and then you're passing the key in it, and this will give you the value. Otherwise it returns none. So it's error free. Maybe go for it. And again, if you're very, very confused that we just use this for lists and I can't get around that, then you can also use the get method. Next, we'll talk about the pop method, which is, whoa, that's cool. The pop method, which allows you to remove elements from a dictionary by passing in a key. So let me do d.pop, and let's remove key 3 from this. So remember, what I'm saying is remove this key value pair with this key value, or with this key, and it will remove the entire thing. If I were to print D right after removing, you'll get key 1 and key 2, but no key 3. And just like the pop method for lists, this function will also return a value, so you can store it. Removed val is this. And I'm also going to print your removed value. All right, so pop method, when it removes the pair with a given key, will return the value associated with it, so you can store it and use it somewhere else. But yeah, so you no longer have that key value of pair in your dictionary. And then again, you can just add it back in again by saying D key 3 is equals to removed value print D. Remember, you're assigning a value to this key in your dictionary, and you're going to have the original thing back in again. So that's all for now for dictionaries. There's not a lot going on. We've already talked so much about the other properties and features of dictionaries because it sort of builds up on lists and other data structures. So for now, this is it, and we'll do more exercises in class.